Alright, next video in the grenade damage testing series is the Stasis Grenades. And there are some important parameters to make note of before we get going. This is a PvE video. Testing is being done in the Grasp of Avarice dungeon, and the focus is single target damage. But that is not exactly the strength of these grenades. I think generally they're tuned for controlling the play space, or used as a stepping stone to access other benefits within the subclass kit. So I'll touch on the functionality of each grenade as well. I will not be covering any exotics though. I know many of you have asked about them on previous videos, but the goal of this series is just to present a broader sense of a grenade's capabilities. If it's a feature of the subclass, that's fair game, but I'm not going to be branching out past that point. The presented damage numbers have been compiled by totaling up all of the on-screen damage ticks, and then comparing that to the wipe screen damage to make sure there are no glaring discrepancies. And here again, I will be running a damage consistency test. I'll throw 5 grenades in their own separate instance, collect the numbers, and I'll give you a high, a low, and an average of the set. Some of these grenades do have a pretty long active duration. In an actual in-game scenario, you would not stand idly by and watch them tick away, even though that's what I will be doing in the video. Feel free to use that thing between your ears to assess situational utility in these cases. And there are a few key Stasis subclass components that I will be highlighting. Whisper of Fissures, which increases the size and damage of a Stasis Shatter, also applicable for Facet of Ruin on Prismatic. Whisper of Durance, which is going to improve the lingering duration of a grenade. Touch of Winter, the Hunter aspect, which functionally changes the performance of each grenade, and the Bleak Watcher aspect for the Warlocks. And I do believe that should cover our bases, so let's get into it. Starting things out with the Glacier Grenade, base cooldown 2 minutes and 1 second. When contacting a hard surface, it generates a linear formation of 5 stasis crystals, which, outside of just dealing damage, can be a useful tool for closing off a lane or an enemy spawn point, creating a platform to reach an inaccessible area or gain a vantage point, or just for providing some additional cover to work behind. It's also a pretty handy grenade for dealing with unstoppable champions who are stunned via shatter damage. Enemies who are within roughly 2 meters of the crystals as they generate will become immediately frozen, and these crystals will remain on the field for up to 15 seconds, which cannot be increased through Whisper of Durance. When shattered, these crystals can deal a maximum of 8,048 points of proximity-based damage apiece. If the grenade does secure the freeze, when the ogre breaks free, either actively or passively, it's going to take another 18,401 points of damage. And just a side note, non-boss tier enemies, or any enemy that does get frozen solid, will not self-shatter. You want the damage, you gotta do it. So, mathematically, the grand total should be 58,641, which I was able to hit in my damage consistency test. The low there of 40k was when the grenade did miss the freeze, but the average of the 5 grenades did come in at 52,345, which is only about 12% less than the grenade's full potential, so not too bad. Next, we're throwing on Whisper of Fissures. This is going to increase the shatter damage range by about 1 meter, out to 7, and it's going to supplement that shatter with one additional value. You're going to get an extra 1,150 points of damage max for each instance. So for 5 crystals and 1 freeze break, that's another 6,900 in total. Around 65,500 should be the theoretical max in this case. I hit 65,300, so really close. And the average of the 5, once again, is solid, with the only real blemish of the set being that low grenade at 59k. Next, we're going to be taking Whisper of Fissures off and just considering the Touch of Winter aspect. This is going to add 2 more stasis crystals into the mix for a total of 7, and instead of creating a linear wall, they are going to generate in a circular configuration. For the damage, the high result there of just under 75,000 is a good representation of max potential, which is actually a touch higher than it should be on paper because we have some random impact values bouncing around in there, but just short of 75k is going to be best case scenario. And I think that tighter grouping on the crystals did help out a bit in terms of consistency. There was a bad grenade that only brought in 66,000, but still we averaged about 71.5. When looking at Touch of Winter and Whisper of Fissures combined, you're getting 8 damage instances, all supplemented by that 1,150 provided by the fragment. On paper, 83,937 should be full damage. Here again, I was just a touch ahead of that. But regardless, 84,000 points of damage is a pretty nice chunk for the Glacier Grenade, especially when you consider the utility that comes along with it. All around, I do think it is a pretty solid option, and it posted numbers that exceeded my expectations. Moving on to the Duskfield Grenade, which does have a quicker base cooldown of 1 minute and 31 seconds. On impact, it's going to explode into a slow applying damage field with a working radius of 5 meters. Total uptime of the grenade is 7.5 seconds, and if the ogre remains in the damage field for 2.5 seconds, it will secure the freeze. Now, the tick damage from this grenade at 47 apiece is pretty negligible, even if you catch every last one of them. But if the ogre does remain in the AoE for the full duration, you can secure up to 2 freezes. Could you get more if you were actively shattering the frozen enemy? Good possibility. Slow obviously doesn't get applied to an already frozen enemy, so like I said in the parameters, use your own judgment or try it out for yourself. But if you are able to get that double freeze, it will net you right around 37,000 points of damage. And if you catch all the ticks from the AoE, you should be right around my high there at 38,275. The low is representative of when only a single freeze was achieved, and I did average just over 30,000 across the 5 grenades. And footnote there, Whisper of Fissures does work with this grenade as well. I'm not giving it its own text block because I think we pretty well established how it works with the Glacier Grenade testing. You tack on an extra 1150 for each freeze break. If you get 2 of them, that's 2300 max. Whisper of Durance, though, is going to provide a nice boost to the grenade's total duration, moving it up to 11.5 seconds. You are getting around 14 more damage ticks, but now you can secure 3 freezes with a single grenade. If your target is willing to stand still and take the full duration of the grenade, you should be right in the neighborhood of 57,000 points of damage. The low test result only got 2 of the 3 freezes available, but my average did climb by about 15,000 points of damage from base, now at 45,763. If using Whisper of Fissures, give yourself an extra 3,450 points of damage if you get all 3 freezes. If you're a hunter making use of Touch of Winter, you're going to increase the working radius of the grenade to 6 meters, and you will generate a little stump of a stasis crystal at the point of impact. And even though it is a little baby crystal, the damage is consistent from what we were seeing with the Glacier Grenade. If it shatters on or near the target, it can deal a maximum of 8,048 points of damage. So with this setup, while we're still looking at 2 freezes, thanks to that little extra pop from the crystal, max potential damage ends up being a little better than 46,000. And you can get the 3 extra Whisper of Fissures hits here as well. 2 on the freeze breaks, 1 on the crystal shatter. With Touch of Winter and Whisper of Durance working together, I was able to get a max damage grenade at 65,362. That's obviously the crystal shatter and 3 freeze breaks. And I did play around a little bit with Touch of Winter, Whisper of Durance, and Whisper of Fissures all applied, just to make sure that max damage was consistent with what we should be seeing, and it did work out on paper as it should in game. The best grenade in my experience hit for just over 70,000 points of damage. Now admittedly I kinda wrote this grenade off in terms of single target damage before I even got started. And while it's not great and you do have to jump through some hoops to get it pushed up to its full potential, if you just brought it along as a general use option, or for its ability to double cover both overload and unstops with a slow leading into a freeze, it can chip in when it comes to boss damage as well, and that's certainly not the grenade's strength, but get a few freezes locked up and it's more than just a tickle. And last up, the Coldsnap Grenade, base cooldown 2 minutes and 1 second. At the point of impact, this grenade creates a stasis seeker that freezes enemies on contact. After getting that initial freeze, it can chain out 2 more times to catch other enemies in the area. The maximum range of a seeker is about 10 meters, and that cannot be improved through Whisper of Durance. So when looking strictly at single target damage, there are no real mysteries to unravel here. When the Seeker hits the Ogre, 920 points of damage. When the Ogre breaks free from the freeze, 18,401. That's 19,321 in total, 20,471 with Whisper of Fissures. If you are using Touch of Winter, when the Seeker makes contact, we're going to generate a small stasis crystal, just like we saw with the Duskfield Grenade. And unsurprisingly, maximum damage on that crystal is 8,048. So that makes the total damage with Touch of Winter 27,369. Whisper of Fissures awards the bonus damage on the Crystal Shatter and the Freeze Break, so add on another 2,300. And the Bleak Watcher aspect, which allows Warlocks to charge the Coldsnap Grenade and turn it into a stasis turret. It does shoot a 5 projectile burst that slows and freezes enemies, making it a pretty good option versus both Overload and Unstoppable champions. But keep in mind it will not continue to fire on an already frozen target. Total uptime of the Bleak Watcher is 25 seconds at base, 30 seconds if you are using Whisper of Durance. And I did test both, but due to the time constraints of the damage phase, results ended up being the same. Damage per projectile is 138, and I was able to secure 6 freezes versus the Ogre every test. The number of projectile hits did vary ever so slightly, but all in all, just over 115,000 points of damage was a very consistent result. And if you are using Whisper of Fissures, you can almost get another 7,000 points of damage out of it. So with the exception of the Bleak Watcher, which can be a nice passive damage supplement in longer damage phases, the Coldsnap Grenade is not at all tuned for raw damage. It is a very quick and reliable way of freezing and opening enemies up for a shatter though, but it really does do a nice job in controlling the play space, and in helping to clear out packs of enemies in the moment-to-moment gameplay. Big damage? No. Good utility? Absolutely. With that though, Stasis Grenades are in the books. I'm going to shift my gaze to the Solar Grenades for the next damage checkup video, so keep an eye out for it when it drops. But have a great day, Guardians, and I'll catch you on the next one.